Putting the process aside for a second and talking about their future aside, let's just talk about what happened in this series. What went wrong for the 76ers, CC?
Well, I think Boston made more adjustments along the series, and Philadelphia, the couple opportunities that they did have, the games that they gave away, because if you look at it from a talent standpoint, roster standpoint, with the Celtics being depleted, you would think that Philadelphia would be a heavy favorite, definitely just based on what they have, what they've done. And, I mean, Boston, we knew offensively they'd be challenged. We didn't know that they would be as good as they would be at home. And I think, to me, the biggest difference is Boston's younger players, their ability to play with confidence at home in a dynamic way that if they go on the road, they only have to win 50% of those games. So they were able to do that, get the split there in Philadelphia. But outstanding series for the Boston Celtics. The adjustment they made, and at the end of the day in the NBA, can you stop people and can you make shots? Boston, the best in the NBA during the regular season, and their younger players in the playoffs, especially this series, 4-1 against the Celtics. Against the 76ers, they made shots.
And I know we're going to focus more on Boston in a little bit, but on the Philadelphia side, it is inexcusable this series is over after 5 games. I know they're young. I know it's a great story. I know that they were one of the best stories in the process. They're over-under for wins this season. They exceeded that by about 10. There's a lot of good stories for the Philadelphia 76ers. But the reality is this series should still be going on. Philadelphia could have won this series 4-1 themselves. There were 2 games that were decisive victories. Game 1 by Boston, Game 4 by Philly. Every other game in this series not only came down to the end, Games 2, 3, and 5, but Philadelphia had multiple points in each of those games where they were a better than 9 out of 10 win probability. A 22-point lead in Game 2 after they lose Game 1. Up 4 with a minute left in overtime in Game 3. Last night, up 4 with 90 seconds left in the game. To go 0 for 3 in that spot is disastrous. I said going into this series, CeCe said something I thought was interesting, which is if Boston wins, the process has been delayed. I went as far as to say I cannot see a path to victory for the Celtics that doesn't involve a significant injury to a Philadelphia 76er, most notably Embiid or Simmons. The Sixers were fully healthy in this series, and they got out-executed and out-finished, game in, game out, and that's problematic for them.
Well, I just don't think the problem I have is when you say, well, this is a young Sixers team and they're just getting used to the spotlight and they're just getting used to going deep into the playoffs. Because without Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward, this is a young Celtics team who don't have the experience in the playoffs, who weren't used to going into the postseason, who did win on the road. They had all the same things afflicting them that the Sixers had. So my question to you then, CeCe, becomes how much of what happened to the Sixers falls on those 2 guys, on Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid?
Well, some of it is on them. Because in critical situations, Joel Embiid couldn't get a big bucket in the end. And last night's game, he's got the ball at point-blank range. He can't finish it off. You're supposed to be, in that situation, Joel Embiid, you're supposed to be able to get a bucket. They went to him in isolation. They didn't double-team him. And he's within 2 feet of the bucket, and he can't get it in. The reason why? It's still a skill thing. He's still a young player. He still doesn't have any left hand. One thing about LeBron, what makes him special, when he's at the rim, not his ability to get to the rim, but at the rim, he can finish with his right or his left hand. Ben Simmons cannot shoot. It's not exaggeration. He cannot shoot outside of 5 feet. So what did Brad Stevens do? He puts bigger guys on him. They lay off of him. And then if he tries to get to the rim, all those shots are contested in very tough shots. So they have major holes in their game, those 2 players, that they have to be able to fill those holes. And that's what I think will happen this summer. But the reason why I believe the process is still working and didn't really take a big step backwards, even though they have Kyrie coming, is because Markelle Fultz. I believe his athleticism, Philly does not have a point guard. Ben Simmons is not a point guard. I'm willing to debate that conversation with other people. He doesn't have the mindset for a point guard. He can't shoot like a point guard. He doesn't have the temperament as far as taking care of the ball like a point guard. So I believe Fultz, when he comes back, and he is that dynamic athlete at point guard to be able to negate some of the things that Kyrie Irving can do. And also, on the offensive standpoint, Boston don't have anyone that can guard him. So I like a point guard for the 76ers and one other veteran in free agency. I believe the process will be on schedule.
You seem more bullish on Fultz than the Sixers did. The Sixers refused to play him.
They didn't play him.
He got healthy. He got able to play at the end of the regular season, and they felt like we were better off with not only Simmons, but T.J. McConnell, with anyone that they would put in the game.
No, that's right now. We're talking about moving forward.
Sure.
Moving forward. All right, there's a reason why he was the first player in the draft, and he showed signs of that. When you get in a series like this, where his shot is still suspect, no, you give him the whole offseason and next year. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about if he was in this series.
Listen, I'm glad you mentioned that he was the first pick of the draft, because I don't think the process is off the rails. I'm not arguing that. I am arguing this was a disastrous series for them because it should be 3-2. It maybe should be 3-2 Philly. It certainly shouldn't be over 4-1 Boston, given how these games were played. But you mentioned the process. The architect of that process was Sam Hinkie. They fire him at the end of last season. And then the Colangelos come in, and what do? They trade out of the 3 spot with Boston, end up giving up a future draft pick so they can go get Fultz. Boston gets an extra draft pick and gets the guy who was the best player in this series, Jason Tatum. Like, that was you bring up Danny Ainge all the time, Jenna, and I give you a hard time just because I know his childhood crush and it's funny, but
you brought that up just now.
I understand that. But what he did with that trade in particular, that is a franchise.
He got the better player and a pick.
Right. He got a better player and what likely will end up being, it's going to be Sacramento's pick next year. Sacramento's a train wreck. So that is one of the best moves he's made. On your point on Simmons, you've been saying all year, listen, the guy can't shoot outside 5 feet. In this series, he took 59 shots. He took 2 shots outside of the lane. And they weren't far outside. They were barely outside. He only took 10 shots outside of 6 feet. He was 2 for 10 on those. So if people don't watch the Sixers, when C's been saying all year long he can't shoot outside 5 feet, it sounds like hyperbole. Not only he can't make shots outside of 5 feet, he refuses to take them outside of 5 feet, which is almost as problematic as just missing a lot.
The problematic part is, too, when you have a dominant center in Joel Embiid, it clogs the lane, like LeBron. I'll give you an example. LeBron needs shooters around him. He didn't realize that until he started getting into the Miami tenure, where he already had D-Wade, he already had Bosh. They had to convert Bosh to a stretch 5 to open up the court. When you have Ben Simmons, he can't shoot, and you have Joel Embiid, who has the skill set, he can play inside or outside, all it does is it clogs the lane and makes it cumbersome to be able to run the offense.
This is the only summer they can do it. People need to understand this. Because Joel Embiid's contract extension is kicking in, and because they are going to give Ben Simmons the max, and because they drafted Markelle Fultz at number 1 overall and the salary that goes along with that, and because of the contract they gave Robert Covington, the only way they can sign a free agent, not trade for one, or sign a superstar, not trade for one, not give up one of these big pieces, is this summer. If they do not sign a star player this summer, they will not be able to over the next 5 years. Doesn't matter what the cap grows to, this is their window of opportunity right now. And so that's why you hear LeBron attached to them. That's why you hear Paul George attached to them. That's why, even though they'd have to trade for him, you hear Kawhi Leonard attached to them. Because they couldn't wait out Kawhi's contract. They couldn't say, oh, Kawhi, we hear he really wants to come here. We'll wait a year till he's a free agent. They wouldn't. In a year from now, they can't do it. And if you believe in Boston, the way I know you do, Jenna, the way I believe you do, Chris, about that they'll be better with Kyrie, they'll be better with Gordon Hayward, obviously they'll be better as Tatum and Brown get a year older, they need to do more. So to compete for a championship, that's not even talking about those monsters out west.
Right.
And so, yes, absolutely, 100%, they need to add someone.
So I understand everything you're saying. I understand where that window is. But do we even have this conversation, CC, had this team made it to the Eastern Conference Finals? Do we look at this team and say, you know what they need is another piece? They need one superstar and they're a complete team.
Yeah, if you're being honest, if their overall lack of athleticism, the lack of shooters at certain positions, and to me, I don't believe Ben Simmons is a point guard. He doesn't have the judgment to be a point guard. He definitely can't shoot good enough to be a point guard. Nick talks about where he has a passing advantage. Yeah, he has a slight passing advantage, but he doesn't take care of the basketball. He doesn't have the mindset, how to run a team, how to set people up. He's very, very limited at playing the point guard. He didn't play point guard at LSU. So now trying to force that on him, I believe he's playing out of position.
Well, here's the thing, though, because you and I are diametrically opposed on this specific point. I think Ben Simmons has to be your point guard, and I think he can be a transcendent point guard. But if shooting's...
Where's Fultz going to play?
I think you can play them both in the backcourt at the same time. Fultz can be your scoring two, and then on the defensive end, Fultz can guard the opposing point guard, and Simmons can guard a wing. But if shooting's your concern, unless you're going to play him at center, what position
I'm not
is
playing
shooting?
him at a position. I'm playing him because he's an athlete. It's not about he's a 2, he's a 3, he's a 4. That part is not important.
But with your dire concern about his shooting, which is legitimate, the position outside of center, whether it's 2, 3, 4, whether you're saying positionless, that you can get away with being a deficit as a shooter more than any of the others. You can't be a deficit as a shooter as a wing. Like
I just think you're getting too caught up with the point guard position. All right, he's a good athlete. We're going to have on the floor. He's going to handle the ball some, but he is not a traditional point guard. He does not have the skill set. He can't run an offense, and it's important, Nick, he can't shoot.
I understand, but the important him not being able to shoot is no matter the position he's playing, that matters. I would argue it matters more in the positions you're talking about. But I disagree with you on if he can run an offense. But to Jenna's question, would we be talking about this had they won this round? Listen, Philly is trying, the process is about trying to win a championship. And this team is presently constituted, unless the Warriors break up, unless Chris Paul gets old quick, they are not ready to compete with the Warriors and the Rockets. Now, if they're saying we're going to take the super long view, we're going to wait those guys out, we're worried about 2021 and 2022, that's fine. But they could go be the league favorites to win the title if they sign LeBron. They could be one of the top favorites if they get Kawhi or Paul George. This is the summer to do it. I absolutely would go all in on that, 100%.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.